Welcome to the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast, a show dedicated to modern learning and development. With your hosts, Daniel Mendonca and Scott Babcock.
It's podcast day. Welcome to the show. This is If You Build It, Will They Learn? I'm Scott Babcock. I am back from vacation, ready to go, energized, better than ever, I hope. And I'm with your co-host, Daniel Mendonca. Daniel, it feels like forever since we've chatted, but 2 weeks later, how you doing?
Doing well, Scott. I have one simple question for you. Did you listen to my voice on the beach?
Not on the beach. No, I'll blame it on poor cell reception. How's that sound? That was what kept me from listening to you while I sat on the beach. And
I just kept, I don't know, I'm sure you listened to last week's. I just kept kind of saying, hope Scott's listening to my beautiful voice on the beach,
I will say I was probably a little bit distracted and probably not in the right frame of mind to be podcast listening at the moment. But it was a great vacation, and we'll talk about that more later on in the show. I have no doubt. But I am glad to be back. I am glad to see that the children didn't burn down the house while I was gone. That always makes me feel good. See, you guys can be trusted. Dad was away. You didn't play too hard. Good news.
Hey, we still got listens on the podcast. People still showed up. Hopefully they enjoyed it. I can't imagine listening to me talk for 20 minutes straight. Woof.
I feel the same way whenever I do my own. So poor listeners, poor audience, whenever they have to listen to us talk to ourselves for 20 minutes. But we're back, and right on theme. Daniel kept the momentum going last week as we roll into our week this week, and we keep that conversation going this month. We are excited. We're going to be talking about ways in which gamification can help motivate and keep the momentum going for your learners over extended periods of time. We're going to dive into that topic today. So without further ado, let's get started. So just to kick off the conversation today, I think it makes sense to begin at the beginning. Whenever we do these conversations, a good starting point. Why do people like gamification? Or why do they participate in gamification? There's obviously some science that we want to talk through a little bit here and some kind of studies. But the reality is, I think as we have this conversation, you're going to find it probably resonates with you in your day-to-day life. We're going to talk a little bit more of that in the next segment as well. But, why do people participate? And simply, we've talked about intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. And a lot of gamification is built on that intrinsic, the self-motivation to feel a certain way. That can definitely be a driver. But it also interacts with your extrinsic. So a lot of times gamification is based on achievement and being rewarded with something. Think about your favorite rewards points for a retailer, or think about winning things if that's an incentive-based program. Or sometimes it's just getting like some digital swag and that kind of virtual pat on the back. So it impacts both of those motivating factors for a lot of people. And we've discussed that kind of in depth in a prior episode that we can always go back to. But that's sort of the starting frame point, I guess I'd like to think about, is just it's your own personal motivator is what gamification ends up driving for you.
For me, it comes down to competition. I love talking about this subject. I think gamification is something that interests me. I know we've talked about this before. I am a gamer. When you think about that sort of same concept, you deal with mobile games, you deal with online console games or PC games. So that's number one. But number two, it's also something that we do very well at Haylight. I think it's one of the things, if you had to list them in order from best to worst, it's definitely near the top of the list of things we do well on our platforms and in our content. So that's one of the reasons why I love this topic as a whole. And like you said, Scott, I think it's the friendly competition. It's the desire to want to beat yourself, see yourself climb up a rank, climb up a leaderboard, and grow. And get that endorphin rush of achieving success or being better than somebody else, which we're all kind of accustomed to. I think, especially in North American culture, we love being better than the person next to us. That definitely drives us. And then lastly, the idea of competition is something that makes people want to achieve and wants to grow and try new things. So all of those, like you said, those motivating factors are going to help drive momentum. And I think gamification builds a really great foundation for people to compete and want to participate.
And you bring up a good distinction that we probably should sort of bring up early on, is the difference between gamification and games. And often I think when we have conversations with clients or individuals, those two terms can often become sort of muddled or confused. So when we talk about games, what we're typically referring to is an activity that drives the learner to experience and behave in a certain way in order to play or interact in a fun way often. So these can be trivia games, they can be experiential scenarios and situational things. When we talk about gamification, we're not talking about playing a game because often that can be viewed almost negatively. While learning games are a great way to retain things, when we talk about gamification, we're talking about things that play upon the rules of games, the idea of achievement and seeking out successful accomplishment. And often equates to things like earning points in a platform or something like that. But it's not a true game. It's the elements of a game that are built into the actual learning experience and things, and the interactives and components that a platform might bring forth. So we will talk about how this shows up in your daily life, and hopefully that will help resonate the difference a little bit for most folks. But that differentiator is often a big hurdle when we have this conversation. People hear the word gamification and they think games, and that's a distractor for a lot of folks, and that's not what we're referring to here. We're talking about the idea of continuous achievement and accomplishment over time. All right, so briefly we talked a little bit about what gamification can do or why people choose to participate, sort of that level of competition, the idea of personal motivation, the intrinsic value of a job well done for a lot of folks, or the extrinsic value of getting rewards in whatever form that is. And we can talk about that a little bit more. A couple interesting notes: about 88% of respondents to a survey run by Talent LMS in 2019 stated that some level of gamification within their work environment, whether that be their learning environment, their talent management, or internal intranet sites, communication platforms, but having that gamification element within their jobs made their life happier. They enjoyed work more, which is really a remarkable stat when you think about just the overwhelming majority of people appreciate having some level of that gamification, that strive to compete with each other and have recognition and accountability based on that. That's a lot. Going along with that, about 72% of employees said the gamification motivates them to work harder. So not only are they having more fun at work and they're happier in their jobs, but they actually want to raise their bar as a result of that gamification. That gamification can be a motivator to do a little bit more, or to constantly try to achieve a little bit more in the world. And I think when we talk about our next segment, which is really about how does this relate to your day-to-day life? So if you're having trouble making the connection on a learning level, what is it in your life that actually works this way? I think those are good backdrops to think about as we move forward in the conversation.
Yeah, I think when you think about those statistics, just to add a little bit more and talk about our day-to-day life, is sales. And I always go back to sales in my discussions, but sales is a great example of how work can be gamified fairly simply. You typically have quotas you can achieve. There's typically, in most industries, there'll be top salespeople in different business units and in different areas to show the competition level, allow people to kind of climb the board. There's rewards based to, maybe they're commission based rewards, or maybe they're just rewards based rewards, additional weeks of vacation, things like that can go into that sales process. So I think all of those things would allow you to be happier. But then I also, if you talk about the activities that are riddled kind of throughout your day-to-day roles in your work, it kind of takes your mind off of the day-to-day grind. You're kind of working towards something that maybe is a little bit more fun, more engaged, to empower you to continue to do well. So I can definitely understand how that number of 88% of people is actually that high in terms of being happier at work.
So a couple things that we should probably talk about is just, where do you see this in your life? So again, if you're having trouble thinking about what does gamification mean in the learning industry, let's simply, what I usually ask people to do when I talk to them about gamification is think about your wallet. If you opened up your wallet, your billfold, your purse right now, and you just started looking through all the contents of that wallet, think about every reward card that you have with any organization, company, retailer, manufacturer, whatever, and just think about them. Start counting them up. Whether it's you've got your Starbucks card, whether you've got Old Navy points, you've got your Target red card, you've got your Dick's Sporting Goods scorecard. I'm just listing some of the ones that are in mine right now, right? As I think about it, there are a million of these. And those are just the hard physical cards that you maybe show. The world's gone more digital. So now think about every reward program that you see online. There's point programs, and you can get email notifications from just about every vendor or manufacturer that's out there. All that is gamification. They're encouraging you to make purchases to earn points that you will then get to be able to re-spend, reinvest, reevaluate. And you're really not doing anything different when you talk about learning. It's all about getting people to come back into your platform and to keep acquiring points to either be spent or to move them up a leaderboard or anything like that. And really, the reward cards that you have in your personal life is a value of gamification that just exists in the world from more of a marketing perspective, but we're all very familiar with it. And the reality is, I think if you think about those cards, you are more likely to drive the extra block to get your star points at Starbucks than the local coffee shop that maybe doesn't have the same points. Or you're willing to go out of your way to go to a certain clothing manufacturer, and maybe drive past 2 or 3 others because you'll get 5% cash back if you spend X amount of dollars, or you're so close to earning that $5 gift card at your sporting goods store that you'll skip the one you drove past because you want to go spend your money over there. So they really do work. You maybe don't think about it, but subconsciously that's always sitting in the back of your head. And we all are probably part of a rewards program that we are still dedicated to doing, and yet to see any kind of payoff because the limits are so high. You need to earn $5,000 worth of points to get $5 back, but I'm going to get there sooner or later. And we still keep going for it. It's amazing what we will do to drive for those just even perceived value points that might even be unattainable.
Yeah, it's funny you listed all of those, Scott, and the last 12 months has been different, but I have the luxury of traveling a lot for work. So, and because of all of those things, we're very lucky at Haylight in terms of what we prioritize, in terms of allowing people to try to fly the same airline, stay in the same hotel, and do all of those things as much as possible, because I am fly Delta, stay in anything of a Hilton chain, and rent from Enterprise. And that's wrong. I don't know what I rent from anymore because I haven't rented a car in 18 months. But that kind of concept of try to do that all the time. That way I can build it up and go. And it's funny, when the pandemic hit and it kind of kept going on and on. When I thought about traveling again, I was like, I'm going to lose all my status at all of those places. And it was like, oh, now I need to go travel. I need to do something more. And it allowed me to want to get gold or want to get platinum or whatever it is in those different places. So it definitely creates an interesting dynamic across the board when it comes to the kind of what's in your wallet. The other one that I wanted to bring up in terms of day to day, which I brought up at the start, was gaming. And it's one of the ways that I think you can really differentiate the difference between gaming and gamification. So you log in, you play your game, Fortnite, Call of Duty, Candy Crush on your phone, whatever. I don't know if Candy Crush is still a thing now, but it was definitely the thing for a very, very long time. But then all of those tasks throughout it, like little achievements you need to get by beating this level, or earning these random points, or maybe things you don't even know about, those are gamification. Those are things that keep you coming back. And that concept of keeping people engaged and keeping people empowered and wanting them to come back is really one of the things that will keep you going. And I know that I have some friends in some of the microtransaction games where you can actually earn enough points in the game to pay for kind of the 10-week or 12-week pass that they give you. And they'll actually come back when their previous pass expired, because if they complete a few achievements, they won't have to pay the $10.99 again for the next 12 weeks. So that's a great example of gamification, keeping people engaged and having them come back to complete those activities.
Now you're able to sort of look at what you do in your day-to-day life and see the connection to how gamification can impact your platform a little bit. And your learning style, and getting your users to come back more frequently for content and training to be better prepared for their job. and you better understand what gamification is. But let's talk about like why do it. So obviously we've talked a little bit about the loyalty of brand, if you will, and we've talked about brand affinity and learning in past episodes as well. But what else does a learner get out of it, or what does an organization get out of the idea of gamification within their training organization themselves? And we've hinted at it. I don't know if we've said it exclusively, but the reality is you are trying to get your learners to not reach the end of what you can offer them, right? So if they've taken the 10 pieces of content that were available to them on day one, what gets them to come back on day two? And a lot of times it's motivating them for giving them points for logging back in or coming back and contributing to the community. Any of those components, if you keep giving them small tidbits of achievement and recognition, that helps drive their momentum to keep coming back, right? What's the hook that keeps them checking on the site to see when the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th pieces of content are going to drop that they can continue to take and ultimately earn more points, more status, more achievement within your platform? That really is the primary benefit to any organization using gamification, is long-term sustained use in your platform over a period of time that is motivating a user to keep coming back when inherently they might think there isn't anything more, or becomes just a check that they aren't really motivated to go do, and so therefore they'll fall off of that continued use after a period of time if there isn't that kind of value within it.
It's interesting, Scott. Like when you think about, I'm going to ask you a question, throw you a little curveball. When you think about coming back, I guess I'm going to use my patented term. Like, how do you go about relating that back to your objectives? Like, what are some questions that you should ask yourself when it comes down to gamification as a whole, and how it relates to, I guess, your KPIs as a whole?
Yeah, so I think just like with any objective-based conversation, and no surprise Daniel was going to bring that up in an episode with us. I appreciate that. Keeping us centered, that's good news. But I think it is all about, just like when you talk about an objective for any individual piece of content, you're talking about what is the behavior I'm trying to change, or what is the perception I may be trying to modify for one of my learners. I don't think gamification is that far off. Whenever we think about gamification internally and we talk with our clients, our first question is typically, what is a behavior within the platform that you want to emphasize, that you want to promote or encourage or recognize within a user's mindset? And then we design gamification that ultimately promotes that. So, if you have a client that's saying, I want daily visits, I want everyone to come back into the site every day to do something. Whether they're taking content, whether they're contributing with their peers, whether they're participating in a cohort or a dialogue or whatever that might be, we start to assign gamification that inherently promotes that. So every time you come into the platform, you get points for visiting today. Every time you post on the community feed, you get points for that. We're running a program right now where if you take content at a certain volume, quantity, achievement of that earns you maybe a sweepstakes entry. So there's levels of what gamification can mean, but you start to say, what are the behaviors I want to impact? And you start to apply that gamification theory and kind of planning to inherently drive those behaviors without bludgeoning someone over the head. I think that's always, there's a certain amount of nuance that comes with gamification, a little subtlety, that you're sort of trying to drive someone to do something you want them to do without telling them to do it, because we all inherently sort of get defensive when we're told you need to do this and need to do this and need to do this. But if I give you the treats that make you more excited for it, you'll sort of just do it on your own. And you can sort of train people to utilize your site in a certain way that is beneficial to you. But it's really no different. What is my objective is what behavior am I trying to drive?
I was going to add in to that is one of the things that I always believe in is when people feel part of something, they tend to want to refer others or bring people along for the ride. And the different gamification features you see a lot of the time of like, hey buddy, I'm ranked this. What are you ranked? Or I'm number 7 on leaderboard. Are you on leaderboard? Where are you on leaderboard? And it allows people to want to compete, but bring people along for the ride with them. And in most cases, you hear about this in sports and other things, when people are part of the culture, in this case, it would be a learning culture. They tend and they feel like they're engaged in it and they're part of it. They want to bring people along for the ride, which is great for your organization, and which is going to continue to drive everything forward. and into the direction you really want.
You make a good connection, and it sounds like you teed it up, but it's not. I promise, it's a bit more organic than that. Sabrina did a lot of research on this and got us some numbers. And when you talk about wanting to bring people into the conversation, we have the same study from Talent LMS in 2019 that says about 87% of employees feel more socially connected when gamification is also part of their learning platform. So when I think you talk about wanting to bring people along on your journey or bring them into the platform, there is an amount of fun that goes with some bragging rights or bringing more people into the competition, that inherently people want to be more connected, and gamification also allows for that. You're all sharing an experience in which you are all sort of, whether you consider it being graded or evaluated, or you're competing on the same platform with the same rules. You can kind of gauge yourself against others that are doing similar jobs or working in similar industries. So I think that's a great call out, that it's also a great way to improve social learning, which ties us back into our one of our topics from a prior month, right? So trying to tie all of this together again, gamification is going to impact that as well. Another good stat, I think, is that 71% of employees believe that gamification leads to an increase in energy levels. That's according to an e-learning industry study in 2020. Again, we talked about it, it's more fun. When you're having fun, time flies, yes. But I think you just feel more energized when you're having a good time. And I think that ultimately also increases your motivation to keep going. When you see results, when you're seeing that behavior change and having some accomplishment, you're more likely to keep participating.
That's second stat you gave about energy levels, Scott. I think it's it's that great example of, and I'll keep probably going back to sports, but like when you can feel like you're tired and exhausted or fatigued, or in this case, mentally fatigued from doing something, and the idea of competition and the idea of competing against someone else drives you through it. Um, and that's, I think that's a great just stat of something you can pull in from um, everyday life with everybody, and bring it into your organizational goals. I wanted to also talk about something that really bases off of what I mentioned last week. And I talked about momentum and productivity from employees. And another stat from e-learning industry was that gamification can increase company productivity by up to 50%, and employee engagement by 60%. And what I talked about last week was the idea of momentum, which obviously of people, keeping people engaged because of you're delivering content the way they want to see it. You're delivering content how they want to engage with it. All of us, whether we know it or not, go about our daily life in a gamified manner in most cases. That's the way intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation is kind of structured nowadays. Everything we do, from going to get groceries to the store, from the store to going on trips, is all gamification, like we've talked about. So that idea of delivering information and tasks to your employees the way they want to receive it or how they typically receive it, um, will encourage productivity because it's normalized and it's not just this additional item. So it keeps them engaged in exactly that way because they're comfortable with the format.
Absolutely. And I think if productivity obviously becomes another huge benefit of your organization when we talk about the reasons gamification is there. I was just thinking, as you talked about like traveling and gamification in our daily lives and how it's there, even small things, and maybe this is more just a dad component, but I like to try to beat the GPS wherever I go. Like, and that's just, it's a small thing. But that is gamification on some level, is saying, ooh, I bet if I take the shortcut through take a right here instead of a left that it wants me to go, if I go that route, I bet I'll shave 30 seconds off of my time. That's been an inherent game of dads for, at least since I was a little kid. My dad used to do it before there even was a GPS. So it was always, how can we shave an extra 10 minutes off of our road trip or whatever? And little things like that even are just sort of subtle gamification that we've probably been playing with ourselves to help us go a little bit further or do a little bit more, make a task seem a bit more energizing, and add some element of fun to try to be more creative or more innovative. And I think all of that plays into that productivity and that engagement of our employees, if they feel that they're a bit in control, and while also feeling rewarded for doing those extra actions. So now you get why to do it, how to, why your learners are interested, why it's important to your organization, understand a little bit about what gamification is. Our podcast is all about trying to help you execute on some of that, give you some tips and tricks on what it means to do the task at hand and get gamification into your learning environment. So let's talk about a little bit about what your role is in executing gamification within your organization, your platform, or for your learners. And because I like to stay super on brand for our month, you, as a learning and development professional, can't lose momentum if you want your employees to maintain momentum. And simply what I mean by that is, if you want people to keep coming back into your platform to experience new content, to experience new experiences, to engage with social learning, you have to keep providing them the opportunity to come back and find something new when they get into your platform. So if you launch content in January and then you don't go back and touch your content library until July, I don't know what you were hoping you were going to get out of people during the months of March and April and May, but at some point they're going to come back. This is the same thing. I'm not coming back anymore, and you'll have lost them. So think about that strategically as you're talking about what should our cadence be for how we want to roll out content within our platform, and I think that will help keep momentum in your platform as well.
Yeah, I always think about it this way in the idea of, if you want to solve a problem or you want to achieve success in a certain way, it really comes down to making sure that you are able to, I guess, understand what the core solution is you want to solve. So, for an example, it's your really responsibility on whether or not your organization has a positive learning culture. That's up to you. So a lot of people may go, our people don't engage with our learning, they don't train, they're just not accustomed to doing it that way. And the reality it is, you have to ask yourself the question of, like, not how can we fix this problem, but like what is the true solution? So in the idea of, you can't lose momentum, the reality is, if I continue to put the gamification features in place, I continue to put content out there, I continue to, as an organization, provide that information, it's going to continue to drive momentum through our employees. But it's your responsibility, and I think that's really what you're trying to get to with that point, is it's your responsibility to continue momentum, because going back to what we talked about earlier, it is contagious and people will come along with you and bring others along with them. So it is your responsibility. You should always be looking in the mirror and figuring out how you can drive more gamification, more competition, and more momentum.
And I think we would all recognize as learning and development professionals that there is a learning drop off or a learning cliff or a degradation in retention over time. And so I often think of when someone comes and says they want to make a training or they want to create new content, whatever topic that might be about. One of the things that I always, at least internally, want to get out of that conversation is, it's great that you want to do something in the moment, but what does tomorrow look like, or 90 days look like, or 6 months look like? Is there a continuation of this conversation? How can we bring back some of the elements? And so that you're not thinking that one piece of content, but maybe it's a series of content. What's the 101, 201, 301, 401 model on this? How do we keep getting people to revisit that content over time without making it redundant? We don't want them to just keep taking the same course over and over again, but how do you start to build on concepts and blocks of information so that people are recalling information? They're doing a lot of the things we've talked about from a learning philosophy and learning strategies and general adult learning theories, so that they're executing on not just the knowledge gained the first time, but they're bringing that back and they're retaining that information to be executed on and applied in their behaviors over time. And that, I think, is a big part of this don't lose that momentum strategy, and the gamification strategy is, it's not just what am I going to launch today, but how is that going to resonate over the next X period of time. So keep that in mind. It can't just be think in the present, but you have to think a little bit to the future as well. And that keeps that momentum going so that it isn't just a one and done experience.
And I think this goes, I'm going to wrap it up on my side, just going back to the objectives. Is, if you want someone, the objective is to come into your LMS, come into your experience platform, whatever that may be, weekly, then you have to match that with achievements, gamification, content, what your objectives are. If it's monthly, if it's bi-monthly, if it's quarterly, that will all drive your different strategy of how you're releasing information, content, achievements into the field. So a lot of times we see this in our day-to-day. Clients will come out and go gung-ho about what they want to do around a product launch or something new, and then it trails off but they want people to come in every month. So maybe it's great to spread those things out and find ways to engage them over a longer period of time.
And I'll just wrap up really fast with the idea that the last piece that I think you're responsible for as an L&D staff or professional in this is communication. So Daniel makes a great point. If your expectation is a monthly visit, but the user is expecting content on a weekly basis, there's going to be a disconnect there that's going to create a poor experience, and ultimately isn't going to provide that gamified delivery on achievement. So you need to set those expectations that you're looking at a monthly cadence, and so that is the rhythm with which you want them to become accustomed. If you're putting stuff out weekly, but they think they're supposed to be coming monthly, you're going to be disappointed as the L&D professional. The user is going to have a better experience because there's always going to be a lot every time they come back, but you're not going to see the result you were hoping for. So clear communication on those expectations and kind of the rhythm and cadence of what your culture is looking for will also help drive this experience tremendously more than it would if you just left it to its own devices.
Come on, get happy.
All right, it's the end of the show. We do this every time. We wanted to bring a little positivity, a little energy back into the audience, and hopefully brighten your days a little bit, and let you know what's going on in our lives that makes us smile or feel more energy. I'm going to go first because obviously mine's probably very obvious. It's on the surface of my face, almost literally. But it was amazing to get away for a little while. My wife and I were able to celebrate our anniversary, the big 10 years. So it was also incredibly exciting to be able to get away, spend time with her. So one is the fact that super happy that we made it 10 years and happier than ever, and just very excited about the opportunity to get away. And we went to Mexico. We were able to sit on a beach and by the pool and do nothing for a week. Very isolated in its experience, and very tranquil and spa-like, and it just gave us a chance to talk without kids screaming around us and everything else. So feel even more connected to my wife, and just kind of centered a little bit in personally, and more energized even to get back and just kind of relieve some of that stress. So and I got a nice tan from being down Mexico way. So and while I missed everything about the podcast and everyone else, I was not too sad to be gone. So that's my positivity. I'm very happy, and I'm feeling energized to be back.
You're forgiven, Scott. You didn't have to miss us at all. I definitely understand that. Positivity point. I think these past few weeks, I'm really excited. I'm not sure if there's any soccer fans on the podcast, but Euro, which was, they're still calling it Euro 2020, which is kind of freaking me out. Feels like I'm living in the past, but it was canceled and moved to this year. So the European Championships for international soccer is starting June 11th. Pretty excited about that. Portugal, defending champs. I am half Portuguese, so that's who I root for in the European Championships. I'm pretty pumped for it. I tend to always have soccer in the background for the better part of 30 days, similar to the World Cup. So I'm very excited for that. Get the outside TV going, sit in my backyard, watch some soccer, probably take some afternoons off from work, and just enjoy. It's always an exciting month. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm also, it's a weird, you mentioned sitting outside. So summer's here, or pretty close. The temps have hit the 90s in Tennessee. So I feel like summer's officially here. Weirdly, my kids are getting out of school a week earlier than planned. So their summer vacation actually starts on Friday. So I'm counting that as summer is here on all levels. So that always makes us feel better. We get to be outside more often. So, all right, that will do it for us today. I'm Scott Babcock. He's Daniel Mendonca, and we will talk to you next week.
Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation by emailing us at podcast@haylight.com. Find us on social media at Build It, Learn It, and be sure to check us out on the web at www.haylight.com. That's HALIGHT.com.